Hey, we're back on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. This is the Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I'm Jeff Gerard, giving Arif Halaby the day off today. Joined by Richard Lewis Grant, my co-host today, author extraordinaire. I have to say, you've written so many books.
I'm just finishing up one right now.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd mention that.
Well, the working title is Tripwire, and it's a total different genre than I'm used to. It's actually a techno thriller.
Okay.
And it's kind of interesting because I do a lot of research. I try to make my work feel real, even if it's a novel. And in relation to Tripwire, I've actually made contact with an FBI agent, a CIA agent.
Wow.
Various law enforcement personnel, just seeing how, given certain circumstances that are in the book, how would society react, how would law enforcement, how would even the CIA and the FBI, and obviously I don't name those sources, but boy, there's a lot out there, and there are very, very good men and women who have our back.
Yes.
We don't even know. We are clueless. Even if it's, your local law enforcement agent,
Sure.
sheriff, police, whatever, you just don't even know what the cost that they have. And then it goes exponentially to that with FBI and CIA.
As deep as the ocean are the
Yes,
layers, I'm sure.
Amazing stuff.
And what an infrastructure we have. And here we think that, a lot of times when we're talking about, budgets and deficits and the debt of the country, a good portion of that is spent, resources spent on making sure that we have those layers between us and
Right.
threats. And
Right.
I think it's important that we remember those types of things. Richard, you were talking before the break about basically getting our financial house in order. We've taken a look at, and if you're just joining us, we talked in the first part of the hour about homeowners insurance, things to look out for, things that are covered, things that are not covered. We'll do a little recap at the end of the show, and also some things that you can do to help yourself when you're faced with some danger, when you're faced with perils like a fire or other disasters that are threatening. A lot of times, with the exception of an earthquake, and although that may even be a misnomer too, we get some sort of warning. We know if a hurricane's coming. Not so much a tornado, but we get some fair enough warning. Fires can break out anywhere, but these types of things we get very little warning, if any, including earthquakes, although seismic activity is tracked. But I don't ever hear any
Prediction.
Predictions or
Tomorrow at 2:04.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We know when other things are coming, but my point is to be prepared. Insurance is that thing that you wish you had more of when disaster strikes, when you have a peril, and it's something that people want after the fact, not ever really before. But insuring yourself up to the point at which you're comfortable and making sure that you've transferred a good majority of the risk to the best risk managers in the world, insurance companies, in my opinion. We've seen it time and again that people have been made whole whenever there's a disaster that strikes and they had the proper coverage. That should bleed over into the portfolio side of your finances. Now, there's the insurance side, which I'll say is part of your finance, because if you don't have it, you're going to spend your finances to make yourself whole again, unless you just say, oh, whatever I've lost, I'll just kind of just sit here status quo.
I'll start over.
Yeah, I'll start over. I had $1 million house on the hill, but it burned down, so I'm going to just go forward without it. I mean, we wouldn't do that. Likewise, there are things that we can do to protect ourselves when it comes to our long-term and retirement savings. Richard, we've seen so much, especially recently, stock market volatility, and I can't imagine how many people were holding the bag, that were holding those positions that were affected directly by some of the correction, and that's the word we were talking about before the show. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I don't like that term, a stock market correction. I totally understand it, but correction to me is like, well, the teacher fixed the spelling mistake on that paper.
Right.
Right. That's a correction. You corrected the spelling.
Making something right.
Right. This is a correction, is the nice way of saying, well, the stock market was really, really high and it really shouldn't have been, and there wasn't enough support for that. So it came down and now it's correct where but no, that means people a lot of people probably lost a lot of money.
Right.
And then if somebody was shorting and expecting it, then they gain money.
That's right.
But anyway, it's a euphemism for somebody lost, because
Right.
the stock market crashed or it went down.
But I think we're just dulling the edge of some of these words that now are becoming offensive to the world. People used to get fired.
Yeah.
Now they get laid off, or companies used to, put out massive layoffs. Now they're right sizing.
Right.
So they were wrong before because they had a whole bunch of employees and a whole bunch of business, and they were there for a reason. And now market loss. No, we didn't have market loss. We had market correction.
Right.
So are you saying that market growth is not right? It's wrong, and we need to correct it? Well, to your point, Richard, when someone is losing money in the market, someone is making money on the other side, and nobody really knows, except for the people that are probably gaining it, where the money goes. But it leaves your account for various reasons, and it's gone.
And we have an understanding of the pressures that are on somebody's portfolio or the stock market or whatever. That's like, we may not know when that earthquake is going to hit,
Right.
but we can look at signals, right? And just like we might stress test our policies of our homeowners insurance, whatever, and see, gee, what if this, what if that?
Right.
I think it is wise to do the same kind of thing with your investments. And that would require, I think, going and seeing someone like you or Arif,
Certainly.
who would be able to briefly go through and say, well, this is a potential threat. This is a potential, risk, and here are the ways to mitigate that. Just like you would say, well, if you add this rider to your insurance company, you'll be covered for that insurance, that sewer pipe, whatever it is. I think that's a very wise thing to do, to stress test your environment, especially as you approach retirement. Sometimes people look and say, I'm 40 years old, I'm working hard to keep my head above water, and my kids, and I don't have time to worry about
Right.
retirement. But that is the time to worry about retirement.
That's a risk in and of itself.
Sure.
Because when you're making the most money that you'll ever make in your life, and you're in your highest earning potential years, that's when you should be, as they say, make hay while the sun's out. While you're doing that, you should be socking some money away. And Richard, what in your book, Power Tools to Slay the Money Dragon, what's a good ratio that people should at least work towards as a goal when they're making money and they want to start saving for their future?
Well, in my book, I use an easy math kind of formula that right off the top 10%, you put that aside and you don't spend it, and it's there, but you pretend it's not, right?
Okay.
And that's part of the growing. And then there's always, in our society anyway, a threat of debt. So I work toward getting off of that debt cycle, and your basic living expenses would be 70%. That leaves you with 10% for to pay yourself like it's a debt,
Right.
and then 20% to deal with either investments or getting out of debt before you invest. So
And people have various methods for what they do with their savings. I think emergency accounts, retirement, and then maybe that rainy day or
deferred saving.
Yeah, something where you have like an opportunity type of account. But living, the message here is living on less than you earn. That's how you get ahead, by
It's
putting.
un-American, but it's a good policy.
Yeah, I mean, we're a society that loves to borrow and spend every last bit and then some. Some of us think that if we have if we make $5,000 and we have $1,000 on a credit card, we can spend $6,000 this month.
Right.
No problem.
How can I be out of money? I still have checks.
Yeah. How many times have we heard that? That's too funny. But it's a sad reality, and you look at statistics of what the average 50-year-old American has in savings. I just read an article this morning that said something along the lines of you're not saving enough and your employer is scared. Because how many programs have we seen out there from companies that employ people? They create incentive programs. Say, look, we're going to put a retirement plan together. You put money in, we're going to put money in. And despite the free money, people still aren't going out there and capturing all of that. And we've done various shows on this. You can catch some of our old podcasts where it talks about what you can do with some of your savings, how you can get ahead in life with regard to your retirement and get ahead of that curve. But I love that we're checking in on our financial house, Richard. Looking at the insurances is important. Looking at your savings is important. But also where your savings is.
And that's what you might do if someone were to call you and say, Jeff, I heard you on the radio. Can I talk to you about where I'm at in my financial house, right?
And I think it goes back to, and we're talking about risk and volatility, there's inherent risk in just about everything we do. If we're working and we're not saving, we're spending every last bit, the risk is we're not going to have any savings on the other end, right? So it just means we're going to have to labor longer, probably harder, or at least it'll feel like it when we're 20 and 30 years older than we are today. And choices become a bit more sparse. We have less choices with the less money we have. Taking a look at your current risk, your ratios, if you will, some people would say, and I think many people that are in our financial industry say that as you get older, you should move more of your money to a safer, more conservative place. And that just is kind of common sense to me. I would say that a person that's in their 60s or 70s shouldn't have their monies in a place that's as risky as maybe a 20 or 30 or 40-year-old would have.
And that is because the 20 or 30-year-old has more time to make it up.
Right.
If the unthinkable happens and the financial Titanic sinks, right?
That's right.
That's why you would say that, and the 60, 70, 80-year-old doesn't, basically.
And I don't care if someone is in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I will tell them the same thing, and I'm sure Arif speaks the same, is that our job at Total Financial is not to make you rich. We're not going to make you rich. We're just going to keep you from being broke.
Right.
Because the money that you ask us to help you with, we're going to protect and make sure it doesn't go backwards. It's going to get stock market index-like returns. It can go up when the market goes up, but if the market goes down, you don't lose. And I think you ask any one of our clients that, the worst conversation we're going to have is that, yep, sorry, you got a zero. You didn't make any interest this year. That's the worst conversation we're going to have.
But you didn't lose anything.
But you didn't lose anything.
Right. And there are a lot of pressures on the stock market to make it, soar up and crash down, and
that's right.
All that roller coaster kind of thing that makes people crazy, right?
And I think one of the most dangerous things someone can do is retire in, as you were talking about bear markets earlier, a bull market where everything is up and things are rising and going very rapidly. Who really knows what's causing that?
Or when it's not going to be that way. And that's what timing your exit from the market is a very iffy thing, because you can be 4 hours off.
Right? Or your exit from a job. You could be a year off. Sure. And what we're seeing is that many folks are looking at this current financial landscape, and let's speak prior to the little the Brexit phenomenon, where people lost, what was it, $3 trillion? I think $3 trillion were lost in the stock market in just a matter of 1 week. And in fact, a shorter period if you take a look at the real
if you
activity.
Were invested internationally.
If you were invested internationally.
Right.
But even then, some other markets and indexes and investments were affected just by the sheer news of that international news.
In the United States, if I'm not mistaken, the mortgage interest rates have dipped in response to what's going on with Great Britain. And there's a lot of things that basically uncertainty is an enemy of the stock market. Uncertainty causes this volatility.
But it can also be the friend, because people they'll bet on the come. They'll put more in, and sometimes they win big.
Sometimes, but you have things like the election cycle, right?
There you go.
Right now, we are in a very unusual election cycle, to say the least.
I would say so.
Unusual is, I'm being careful
here.
Good
word.
And that uncertainty is a pressure on the stock market, because people don't know what's going to happen. You have domestic, things like the UK leaving the European market. I don't think England's going to go broke.
Sure.
And in the long term, it's probably a good move for them. But there is fallout, right? And like you said, or terrorism, that whole horrible thing.
And we're seeing a mixture of everything you're talking about, Richard. We're in an election year, which is usually a time where people start to get a little bit iffy about where their money is being held. We have had international news affecting us. We've had a lot of terrorism, a lot of terrorist threats. So you combine all of that, And there's no wonder, in my opinion, why the markets are as volatile as they are.
Sure.
And if your money is there, what's happening to your savings?
Right. So that's a very good indication of the stress, right? We talked about stress being on your stress test, your insurance policies. That would be stress. There are stresses on your financial house that at least to at least consider where you're at with professionals like you. And
well, thank you. Yes, and people that sit with us at Total Financial, is we're going to ask you how much risk you're comfortable with, and if there's one account or an amount of money that you'd like to keep safe and have it be predictable, we can do that. There's no fee for that. I would wonder why someone wouldn't at least want a second opinion when it comes to the level of risk they may have in their finances. Now, when it comes to retirement, in my opinion, and at least our clients, they want a few things. They want to protect their principal, and when they earn interest, they want that protected as well. So when the market goes up and you actually earn money and it's credited to your account, it doesn't go backwards the next year. It's nice to have a level of protection, but if you have to give up your gains, that's not moving forward.
If I have this
and that's not the case with us.
And I can brag to people, I made 100% on my investment.
Right.
And then a week later, and I'm still in that investment, it drops 120%.
Right.
I have not gained money. I might, and I've lost bragging rights also.
My question would be, who told you to sell? I'd have a couple questions. Did anybody tell you to sell when you were up that high?
That's not often the advice.
Typically we're a greedy society, but I can tell you this: if you have money in that investment or that account, and you'd rather have 106,000 instead of 200,000. Let's assume you put in 100,000, and you'd rather have 200,000 that you can lose tomorrow, or 110 that can never be taken away from you. If you said you want 110 that can't be taken from you, you probably are a good fit for us.
So I'm Jane Doe or John Doe, and I call you up and I say, I heard you on the radio. What are they going to experience?
Well, they can do a couple of things, and I'm glad you asked that. You can come to one of our workshops. We host workshops throughout the Valley, and actually I call it the Tri-Valley area, where we give informational seminars, talk about the alternatives for your retirement accounts, and not just do the traditional and typical investing in the market where it goes up, you make money, it goes down, you lose, and then, oh, by the way, you paid a fee in the meantime. So we talk about some of the alternatives. You know that we're a big fan of fixed index annuities. Now, they're not right for everybody, but we have found that about 70% of the folks that come to us, we're able to help, and we're able to make a difference in their lives, and that's the thing that's been propelling us for the last 20 years, is making a difference in people's finances where they're not going to lose any of the retirement savings that they have with us. And I think that's important to have that the predictability and that level, steady income when they decide to take money from those investments.
So they're going to be comfortable. They're going to get information.
Yes.
And they can then decide, just like, gee, I need more homeowners insurance, or gee, I didn't realize how well off we were. Mm-hmm. Same kind of thing if they stress test their retirement.
And to answer your question, if you come to a workshop, there's no cost to you. You have a nice meal, you take away some great information. And if you choose to work with us, you can schedule a follow-up meeting, and there's never going to be a cost. We don't charge a fee for meeting with you and looking at your finances. And if you have an account that's bothering you, there's no minimum for us. If you have one account or you want to bring all your accounts, you can do that as well. And we'll take a look at it, and it's a low stress way of stress testing your retirement savings. So that's basically what it's going to look like. And if we can help you, we can find out in about 15 minutes if we can make a difference, and it'd probably take about an hour to wrap the whole thing up. It's pretty simple. I'm glad you asked that, Richard, because I think a lot of people think that it has to be this big, long, drawn-out process to have another advisor or another person in their financial team in their corner. So we're the safer money guys. We're going to take a look at it and say, look, if you want to make 100% interest, you're probably not our client. That's just not the way it's going to work. Again, remembering that we're not going to make you rich, but we're never going to let you lose. That's a big deal.
Right, and if you find an investment that's making 100% return, you're going to be dealing with Guido, the enforcer, right? So.
Yeah, I don't think money's doing that anymore. It's just not really doing that. And if it is, you're highly leveraged and you're highly at risk. And we've seen the consequences of that. I think we need to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to wrap this all up. Have some tips for you when we come back from the break about some things you can do to protect yourself and your belongings before a disaster strikes, as well as when it comes to your retirement savings. Some things to look for, things to look out for, some tips and tricks for you when we come back from the break. Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. I want to remind you that you can always catch us on the free KHTS app. You can download it from the App Store or the Google Play Store. If you have an iPhone or an Android, you can listen to us anywhere, access KHTS News, get updates on anything that's happening in the local area and beyond, in addition to traffic updates. This is Total Financial Safer Money Hour. Jeff Gerard, Richard Lewis Grant on your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. Hey, welcome back to the show, Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. Jeff Gerard here, along with Richard Lewis Grant, my guest today and author. Richard, thanks again for joining us for this hour. And
That's author extraordinaire.
Author extraordinaire.
Thank you.
Did I leave that word out? It was on my
That's
brain.
right.
My goodness.
That's my little tag here.
It is. We're going to have to trademark that for you. Put a comma after your name and then add author extraordinaire.
It would be that or, Sir Richard.
I was going to say that. We could dub
do
you.
that. Sure,
and,
you go right ahead.
Sir Richard. I think somebody may contest that, but I wouldn't. I would stand up for you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's do a quick recap. We talked in the first hour about homeowners insurance, protecting your valuables, protecting your home. It's where we lay our head at night, right? So we want to do a few things. Let me give you 3 key areas that I think are going to matter for you in that world. Number 1, review your coverage. Looking at a homeowner's policy, that's not always the most exciting thing, but as I said, when I do our family meetings, when we look at our monthly budgets, we want to start to take a look at some things like our insurance coverages. Now, I recommend a minimum once a year. Every year, you should be getting a renewal package for your homeowner's insurance. It's not one policy like a life insurance policy where you'd have it for, decades on end. A homeowner's policy renews every single year. Sometimes you're going to see coverages change, thin out, maybe fatten a little bit. Sometimes the premium goes up and your cost goes up. So you have to take a look at that. And I think that's a great time to sit down with your agent that sold you the policy and ask some questions, which is my second point. Ask questions. If you don't ask, they don't tell a lot of times, or whatever they do tell you, you just go, and then I'm going to go back to work tomorrow.
Right. Well, one question I've learned to ask is it covered as replacement cost? Because you might have bought something and you bought it 10 years ago and you've lost it now. And you're only covered for what you paid for it. You can't get that again for that same amount. So that would be one of the questions. Am I covered for replacement cost of possessions, whatever it might be?
Great question.
In that.
That's a great question. You're going to see things like, especially if there's a big disaster, maybe a big fire, maybe rebuilding costs go up and there's a spike because there's a shortage of lumber and it has to be brought in from various areas that are not local, and there's a cost to get that there. Ordinances change as well. We have inflation because, look, people want to get paid more than they did 10 years ago to build a house, right? The cost of goods and services can go up.
Building codes
you can
change.
See, now when I digressed for a second or backtrack, but when I read this recently as just a reminder to myself that ordinances change, your policy should be outfitted in a way that if those changes happen, your home was maybe built 20, 30 years ago. What building codes have changed? I've seen just, growing up in the San Fernando Valley, there was a whole boatload of homes, if not all of them, that had something called Romex, right? And that was just a kind of a prefabricated way to wire a house, and
it was a conduit that was pre-made with the wires inside.
Right, but it was a fabric. It wasn't like a fireproof material. Maybe it was flame retardant or something like that. But in any case, that was all outlawed. So if your house burned down, you had to rewire the house. Just that one cost alone could have been something. Maybe the way the structure had to be built changed as well. So making sure that your policy keeps up with those replacement costs in today's dollars. Right. That's an important thing. Now, a lot of them now are updated and they're made in a way that a lot of this has happened. So sadly, the mistakes that people have made in the past kind of paved the way for the folks in the future. And a lot of those policies are updated for those types of things. But you always want to check. I always stress the importance of asking questions. And then let's talk about retirement. Let's do a recap on that. When it comes to your financial house being in order, you want to make sure you have proper coverages so that you're not trying to make yourself whole and you've transferred the risk to the insurance companies properly when you have those coverages. But on the other side of the coin, the money that you do have, whether it's saved, invested, it's put in a place where you're hoping it'll go out and capture soldiers, collect some interest, make some money, hopefully double over on itself. That's wonderful. But is there a part of that money that you want to keep in a place where it's predictable and you know it's coming back to you? How important is it, Richard, for people, and even in your experience, to know that they're going to at least get the money that they put away back, and then hopefully get a little bit more than they put in?
In their investments, right?
Yes.
Sure, you need to kind of secure your borders, if you will, right? And then make a little bit of advances and secure those new borders.
I like
make
it.
a little bit more advance. It's kind of like the game of Risk. Do you know the game of Risk? You know that one? Well,
I didn't. I know what it is, but I didn't play it.
So you capture. It's like capture the flag, and you kind of capture more and more territories on the game board. Well, you need to be able to protect what you just captured, or you're going to lose the whole ball of wax. And that would be like real life. I need to protect my gains, because if I try to overextend myself, then I can lose it all.
That's right. And that's a great point. And that's what we're proponents of. The programs that we offer, like annuities, fixed and indexed annuities, those do that very thing that Richard just brought up. That means you go out, you put your money in a place where you go out and capture some interest, but you want to make sure that you don't give it up next year. So keeping your gains, whether it's a nominal return of, 3, 4, 5, 6%, we're seeing anywhere between 3 and 6%. That's the average. That's what we're seeing. But the folks that earn that, they get to keep that, and they never have to let that go. No matter what happens to the markets, no matter what happens, across the globe, they're seeing that their gains are protected in addition to their principal. Richard, I want to thank you again for joining us.
Pleasure as always, Jeff. I love being here. Can I give a little shout out once again to the firefighters and law enforcement guys who are out there, and girls who are working day and night? Thank you for doing what you're doing.
It's a wonderful service that they provide, and safety. I know I slept well with the fire station right across the street from my house. Thanks for listening. Join us every week at this time on Total Financial Solutions Safer Money Hour. This is your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS.